everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Liam Hartery here with another episode of the Simply Inspired podcast. Today is episode 226, I believe. Happy I've kept count of that. And today I'm joined by Bridgitte Hartley, three-time Olympian. Those Olympics are London, Beijing, and Rio. Bronze medalist at the 2012 Olympics as well. First South African and first person from the African continent to medal at the ICF Canoe Sprint World Championships as well. Today, we're going to be talking about everything involved in the sport of sprint canoeing, the mindset that it takes to achieve a high level in a very, very dedicated sport, and a lot of other great topics as well. So, Bridgitte, thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you for making the time for this.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's absolutely awesome to talk with you. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. Well, not literally the beginning, but back to your early days of sports, if that's okay, and start there. As I understand it, in sort of high school or back in the day, you were involved in a number of different sports and you were sort of all around involved in that. So can you share with us how you transitioned from doing a few different things into sprint canoe and how that sort of came about in the beginning?
Yeah, so I was definitely competitive from very young. I did enjoy playing as many sports as I possibly could at school. I definitely didn't stick to one. When I was in junior school, I started playing netball, and I did athletics right the way through junior school and most of high school. And I remember the first netball team that I made. We went on a holiday camp, and I'd been chosen for, I think, the under-9 A team, and I was center or something. And then when we filled in our information, I was actually 1 year too young, and they said that I couldn't be in the team. And I was like, how can you not put me in the team? I'm really good. So I can't remember what progressed from there, but I probably kept playing. But so it started off on the netball field, I guess, and athletics. And my dad was really sporty, and I remember him having some trophies from running events on the mantelpiece at home. And I suppose that was kind of what I looked at, and I was like, I want to get my own little trophies and couple things. And yeah, I did gymnastics when I was in junior school a bit before my parents separated. And then I changed from netball to hockey because some of my friends played hockey when I changed schools. So the school that I went to, it seemed like hockey was more of the popular sport. So I carried on doing hockey and athletics at school. I wasn't really very good at swimming, but I tried a bit of water polo too. And after my parents separated, when I was about 13, we were close to Richards Bay, and I started surfing. So that was actually, I think, my first dream, where I thought I'm going to be surfing on the world tour, and that this is now what I'm going to chase. And then that was kind of when a lot of girls were starting to learn how to surf in South Africa. So there really weren't so many good girls. So we were kind of on an even playing field of you can just stand and go down the line. And I competed a bit for Zululand as a junior and in the senior SA champs, but I was still a junior. So I traveled a bit in South Africa competing at some really great beach breaks, Komiki in Cape Town. Sorry, my cat's walking across the screen.
Okay. I love cats. I love cats. I can hear my cat actually at the moment meowing in the background. So I don't know if it's picking that up, but no, I love cats. That's cool.
You probably heard it. So I had this dream of surfing internationally, and then my dad decided that it might be a good idea for me to finish high school at Pretoria Girls High, and I had been introduced to paddling by him, but it wasn't a school sport. So I kind of started, and I wasn't too bad, but it wasn't such a big passion of mine. But I guess it was a water sport too. And just before I was meant to now go back to Pretoria and be a boarder at an all-girls school from a co-ed, I competed in an all-girls surfing competition like in Durban, and I came fourth or third or fourth, I can't remember, but I was in the final and I was so excited. And then I just said to my dad, I can't come to Pretoria. And he said, well, I paid for everything. I can't get any refund back now. So just come for 1 year. And if you really don't like it, then you can go back to Richards Bay. And I guess the environment at Pretoria High School for Girls was sport was basically walking distance away now. So for me to get involved in sports, I didn't have to do the first prep was priority actually. And I started doing gymnastics again, which was from 6 to 8 on a Tuesday and a Thursday evening. I played hockey for girls high and eventually made the first team in matric. I did athletics as well. So I really did take part in as many sports codes. I kept taking part in as many sports codes as I could, as well as slowly starting to paddle a little bit more every now and then on the weekends with my dad and my brother.
Wow, that is an amazing story. Don't get me wrong, I knew there were a few sports that you competed in early on in your life, but that is a lot. That is an all-round super athlete. So well done, absolutely amazing. Obviously, with sprint canoe, with what you're known for and everything, am I correct in saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you'd be regarded as more of a late starter in that sport? Is that right?
Yes, definitely. A lot of the paddlers, especially internationally, they would start in a guppy when they're 12 in the small little boat and small paddles. And then they would be a junior and probably compete at junior SA champs and junior world champs and then go on to senior. Whereas the first time I raced for South Africa was, I don't even think I was under 21 anymore at that stage. I was already, I started paddling a little bit more in my second year university. I first played hockey for Tuks, and then my second year, I met some guys that were paddling 1 or 2 for South Africa, and they said, "Come and join us." And I got excited a little bit about the paddling a bit more because I wasn't so good at hockey when you get to university level. I was in the third team, and now an equivalent, I might be in the fifth team because there's so many good hockey players at Tuks. But I really loved the team environment playing hockey, and the guys that kind of started roping me in to paddle more with them were really good. And then they were starting to train a little bit with a Hungarian coach who was based in Benoni, Nando Almasi. And I guess he's the coach that sort of saw some talent. I think I could only do one pull up and never done weights or gym in my life. And my whole life changed completely, where we were all of a sudden in the gym on the side of the dam in Benoni doing training sessions. All of a sudden I could do 10 times 10 pull-ups within a couple of years, obviously not just like that, but with a lot of consistent training. And we had a really great squad that used to drive to Benoni from Pretoria every other afternoon. There were about 4 of us, take turns driving, go train with this coach, and then come back and then still do a bit of studying. And I actually also worked as a waitress at a popular restaurant in mainland called Rhapsody. So I had to do it all to try and get through university. My parents paid for some of the classes or the first few years, and then I got a bursary. But when it came to rent and textbooks and petrol and stuff, I had to kind of find my own way.
Absolutely amazing story. Very inspirational as well, I mean, in terms of how that came about, how you developed through that. Honing in on it a little bit more with this, before we move forward in time a little bit further, what was your process that you went through, with paddling, with canoe and everything, in terms of going from enjoying it and everything to realizing you could go quite far with this? I know you touched on that earlier, but a lot of times when I speak to top athletes, there's that sort of transition where it starts as a hobby. Maybe they like it, maybe they don't like it, that varies. But then they go through, they get a little bit better, and then at a point in time they start having that realization, what, I'm good at this, I can go far. So what was that process like for you, specifically with obviously the sport that you're known for now?
So I think the fact that I was competitive definitely was in my favor. That and training with a coach and a group, we were in a squad. That like you actually then want to improve because you're in the squad. You don't want to fall off the wave of some of the boys when they go faster, or you start ahead and then you hang on for dear life. So I think the fact that we had such a nice squad was really, really good. I think that was the motivation behind my improvement. But I think then I'd also decided that I wanted to paddle the rivers in South Africa, which I'd never done as a junior, and I really wanted to win a river race. So I thought by training in the squad, I would get better to win a river race. And then, funny enough, I only ended up winning my first river race, the Fish River, in 2018, which was a good 10 years or more later, because then I ended up focusing on flat water and going overseas and going to the Olympics. And then rivers were not really something that we were allowed to do or focus on because the seasons were wrong. So
Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah, it's very, very cool to get an insight into, like I say, the mindset development and things. That's something I'm very interested in and talk about a lot with these, on these shows. So you started having, those early successes. You started progressing to there. Now, moving forward in time a little bit, you've had a lot of great achievements, as I mentioned at the beginning. 3 Olympics, obviously the ICF World Championships and everything there. In a moment, we'll get into some of your proudest moments. Before we get into that, though, I'd like to get your thoughts on what it means to you to represent South Africa, represent your country to the world, and really, in some ways, if you get what I mean with this, put your country on the map, like with obviously the ICF World Championships, the first South African, the first on the African continent. Incredible. What does it mean to you to represent your country in that way?
So I think initially it didn't mean that much because all you're doing is you're training hard, you're tired, you have a coach that believes in you, you have the squad, and now you're trying to raise funds to go represent your country. And but if I have to look back now, it's an incredible special occasion. You don't just put a tracksuit on, not just anyone puts on a South African tracksuit to wear, let alone wearing it on a podium with other countries in the world and getting a medal. So I think it really is a special moment to wear South African tracksuits. I think, like I said, sometimes you don't think about it as much initially when you make the team, and then once you make it a few times, then it's almost people think it's a given. But you get just as nervous racing all the selection races and stuff. And wearing that tracksuit at a World Championships, you're representing your country and everyone else at that World Championships. You're not walking around in normal clothes. Everyone's wearing their country's kit. So it's a proud moment to sort of identity. This is who you are, but your country is the one that you're doing proud, as well as yourself and coach and friends and family.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely amazing. So, like I said just now, touching on really, the question here is obviously to touch on some of your proudest moments. So obviously we've been walking sort of through linear time until just now. What I'm doing now is sort of broadening it out a little bit and we can move around time because obviously 3 Olympics, incredible. I mean, a lot of people get to one, I mean, you've got to three. Obviously the World Championships, as I keep saying. There's a lot of other competitions that I've seen you've been part of. So do you have particular ones that are more special to you for some reason than others, or are they all sort of special in a different way type of thing?
I think I definitely do have a couple special ones because I don't have so many World Championship medals and only one Olympic medal. So I guess on one hand, there really are some special moments. I think the first time I won a medal for South Africa, which was a non-Olympic event, the 1,000 in Canada, in Halifax, Canada, I got a bronze medal there. Was super special. It created me it gave me the identity of the athlete racing by myself, and that I'd come out of the 2008 Beijing Olympics and I had said to myself, I'm now going to put my head down and focus on one more Olympics. So to come one more year out of that and at a World Championships get my first World Champs medal was incredible. It really was a special moment. I had a great finish. I had some support in Canada. I managed to be a bit of a tourist. I really had a great competition. So I think that would be the first highlight for sure. And then in obviously London, getting my Olympic medal was, I think that would be the cream of the crop, the cherry on the top for me. I still, yeah, I suppose I've always wanted to try get another medal, but in reality, that's probably the only one that I'm going to have. But some people didn't even get to compete at the Olympics, and that was probably more the cherry on the top because my coach had been working with me very closely for 4 years. I'd lived in Hungary quite a lot. I'd lived in Austria quite a lot. So I had kind of lived a completely different life. I hadn't been at home all the time. I had a lot of support financially too with Olympic Solidarity and our Olympic Committee giving me funding. So I ended up going on a lot of training camps. I made a lot of friends in the process. And at those Olympics, both my mom and dad and my stepdad were there watching. So I was pretty nervous having them there, thinking, oh gosh, I've got to entertain them and I've got to go to the village and back. And they assured me that they would get on with their own thing. I don't need to be worrying about them. They're adults and they'll find their way. But it was the first time that my dad had actually left the African continent. So it was a bit of a stress for me, but I realized that he found his way and he wasn't actually there to put pressure on me at all. I had this funny example when one of the girls I raced from Denmark saw him in the stands, I think 2 days before the race, and she said, oh, Bridgitte, I think I met your dad in the crowd. He's waiting for you when you finish training, but he asked me if I'm also racing the 250, and that's not even an event. So we were racing the 500. So after that, I knew that, yeah, my dad was definitely not putting any pressure on me whatsoever. And then I think the next highlights of my career was getting a bronze medal in Russia at the 2014 World Championships. And that was also an Olympic event, the 500. It was pretty stressful. I thought I wasn't good enough even to make the final. And I had a great semi-final, was in the outside lane, and I just had a phenomenal race and ended up getting a bronze medal there too.
Absolutely amazing. I mean, when I asked that question, I know it's a very big question, to go back to all the highlights. So thank you, first of all, for, for sharing some of those with us. I love the story about your dad. I'll come back to that in a minute, but it is amazing to hear the insights of these things. Talking a little bit further about that, you've touched on a couple of times now, sort of mentioned in passing about like nerves and pressure and things like that. And obviously, one of the things I like to do with these interviews is get into the mindset, like the personal growth that people go through during their journey through sports at a high level, right? So obviously, with that in mind, let's get inside how you mentally prepare for an event, for a race, in terms of what's going through your mind on the build up. We'll talk about the physical training as well. I usually do this the other way around, but we'll start with the mindset for this one. What is going through your mind on the build up to an event? I mean, especially something like the Olympics, there's got to be a way of managing that pressure and the excitement as well, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So I think it's, as an athlete, you're always setting yourself goals. A lot of the time, or leading up to the Olympics, before qualifying, I'd actually set myself a time goal of like the time I really wanted to achieve when I raced, and I actually ended up going faster than that. I think you speak about it a lot every now and then, like you'll mention it to a few people, like I really want to get a medal, and there's imagery as well. But I think what I managed to sort of do a lot of is I had this cap that I wore with like an African continent and this little like diamond at the bottom, and I used to wear that because I felt like it made me feel like I had blinkers on, because I'd always feel distracted and I would always have a good finish on my race but never the best start. So that was something that I always wore, and then I often had this green thermal top if it was cooler that I would wear. And then I had very much a planned routine of when I raced. I would write down everything from having breakfast, the time the bus was, what time I should warm up, what I should do in my warm up. And I think that was really good because it almost distracted me from what my competitors were doing, because everybody has a different warm up plan. But if somebody else gets on the water 2 hours before, then jumps off again, that's their plan. Whereas if I decided it was an hour 40 before and I saw them getting on the water, then it would stop me from stressing even more that, oh shucks, I must get on the water, because I was like, no, the time I said I was going to get on the water was an hour 40, so it's okay, let them go. That is their plan. So I think that really did help me a lot, just to write it down, because I could see then what my plan was, and that was something that really was beneficial in all my racing days.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that insight, because obviously it's quite personal when I'm saying, oh, let's get inside your head and that type of thing. But I think that, with these lessons that people who've achieved such amazing things like yourself, when people share that, you can apply that to any area of life. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to always be sport specific, aspects of preparing for something that's important to you the right way. It's very multifaceted, if you get what I mean. You can really move that around. It's not a question, I'm just saying. So fantastic answer. You mentioned earlier though about your dad and about your family being there and things like that. That sort of makes me think, how do you celebrate when you get a massive win? Does it take a while to sort of sink in and everything, or what is the process immediately after? Like, I mean, for example, even with the bronze medal, is it straight away like, oh, wow, I've done it, or is it sort of taking a little while to sink in? You have to pinch yourself of, oh, actually, I've done it, if you get what I mean with this.
I think it definitely is an occasion that you almost have to pinch yourself afterwards. It doesn't sink in straight away, even when there was a bit of a delay in the results. First and second at the London Olympics was up on the screen, third wasn't, and it was really close. And then it was like, oh my gosh, I think there's a picture of me like pulling my paddles in the air like this. But by then the other girls had got off the water and I couldn't see my coach. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, is this really real? And then you just sort of get excited about it, but you almost kind of in a little bit of like dumbstruck feeling that you don't really know how to react, especially when it's such a big event. You're excited, but it doesn't really sink in properly until a bit later in life. And even now still, I suppose, because I've carried on competing, I don't always see like the big result that I achieved. I often say that maybe sometimes when you've officially retired, then you're like, wow, actually, I did do that. That was pretty incredible. Whereas when you keep trying to compete in different events, then that's the next goal and the next event, and you're always thinking of something else.
Yeah, that makes total sense, that you'll have more time to reflect, as time goes on. I totally get that. But no, it's amazing to get an insight into that feeling, you know what I mean? Because everyone else sort of sees it from the outside, if you're like, we watch the events, like even with what I do with the media and the journalism and everything, you're around the events, and the atmosphere is electric and everything, don't get me wrong. But for the person who's won that big achievement, it's so cool to hear about it firsthand. So that is incredible. But in terms of celebration, as I mentioned, do you like? I mean, I've spoken to some people on the show and they're very chilled out and they sort of go home and have a sandwich or something and go to bed. And some people go out and have these big parties and they're much more sort of extrovert about it. What is if you don't mind me asking, what is your sort of process after a big win? Do you celebrate? Do you give yourself that time to enjoy what you've achieved before the next goal comes, if you get what I mean?
Yeah, I think having a world championship event, there's often an after party or something happening and you've got your friends there. So I think I've always reveled in the fact that after an event, if there is like an after party, I will celebrate with my friends. I wouldn't create an extra like special event to celebrate. My friends did after the London Olympics when I came back in Joburg, and that was quite overwhelming, but also so special that they had booked out this restaurant and put all these posters on the wall and stuff, and that was really, really nice of them to do. But I think I would probably just have a bit of a celebration after the event, and then it's then okay, cool, home time, and what's next.
Yeah, that's cool. As I get the what's next thing, I was just curious if you do stop at all. So it's good to hear that you do make a little bit of time for enjoying yourself as well. So one other thing about the Olympics before we move on to a couple of the last couple of things really. With the Olympics itself, I mean, let's go behind the scenes with it a little bit, because as I mentioned earlier, people obviously watch the Olympics in the billions, I think it is, isn't it really, altogether. What is it actually like in the Olympics in terms of behind the scenes? I notice it's quite a broad question, but in terms of like the things that people don't see unless you're actively involved, where you're staying, how you're preparing, what the time scale's like, I mean, I obviously, like personally, I've seen films about it and things of portrayals of it and everything like that. But because you've been there, and obviously you've been there 3 times as well, so more than most. Really, is there anything from like the Olympic process that you would maybe surprise people or that people don't know that much about?
Well, I think it's actually this overwhelming village that people they're in awe about. But when you first walk in, it's very stressful actually. You're catching a plane to a country that sometimes you've managed to go to the test event the year before, sometimes not. For London, I did get to go and I trained there a bit, so I was really, really well prepared for what the airport was like. Having a manager meet you in the airport and take you to the village is first priority. But then you walk in and it's like you're going through a big security, put your bag through security, you walk through, you have this accreditation card that gets scanned. You don't enter the village without that. It's pretty strict. You've got guards everywhere with guns. And so you first walk in and you're like, oh my word, like, this is pretty hectic. And then there's just thousands of people and everyone's wearing their country's kit, so you can see what country they're from, but then you're trying to maybe identify what sport code they do. There's a massive gym. The eating hall is absolutely overwhelming. You walk in and you don't know where to start. It's almost the size of a rugby field, with any cuisine possible, and obviously the temptations of treats and cakes and pizza. So you have to have a hell of a lot of discipline to sort of say, well, this is actually what I've been eating most of the time. Let me look for food that is similar and don't overeat. And when you finish racing, go and have that treat. So it's very easy to get completely distracted at the Olympics. And also the weather's different. The blocks of flats that you stay in, they're massive, and you might have a block with another country, you might have one by yourself, but with South Africa being a bit smaller, we often share with other countries in the lift, and then the flags go up on the balconies. So you walk around and you're also like in awe. You're like, oh wow, there's Australia, they have 5 different levels, we have 3. There's USA and they actually own the entire block, and there's Brazil and they have the entire block. So you can actually walk around in awe in the Olympic Village. It's really nice to run around as well. It's smallish, like you're not going to run like a 20k, like maybe like a bit of a 5k loop, because they've always put trees somewhere and there's a little bit of a park or a bench, or in Tokyo there was a little bit of water, but I was there for the IOC Athletes Commission, not to compete. But in Beijing they even had little insects in between the trees that I'm sure maybe they were fake or just sounds, I'm not sure. But it was just, there were these little gardens that were so beautiful, that so you could walk around and you could find a peaceful place to just sit around and relax in, and London as well. So, and then there was, in London they also had this glass wall that you could sign your name on, that I actually saw it in the Olympic Museum when I was there in Lausanne last year. I thought I'd signed my name, but I didn't find it anywhere. But I did find one of the paddling girls from Great Britain's name signed on it. So that was quite cool. And then they also have a bit of a games room, and a gym in the Olympic Village is a place where you can post postcards back home. So it really does. And there's an Olympic shop where they have souvenir clothing and things like that, which on certain days towards the end gets super busy. Everyone wants to buy a souvenir. So yeah, it's really like a proper little village.
That is incredible. To hear about, obviously, about everything you shared there, the different countries, that the melting pot of it, the atmosphere. Absolutely remarkable behind the scenes at the Olympics. Thank you, because there's some little things there that people might not know about, really. So it's very much a source of intrigue and fascination for people. So that's absolutely awesome. A theme with this whole talk is obviously the next goal, the next challenge, pushing yourself to be better and everything, obviously. So one of the last things to talk about is obviously your future plans. I mean, when I was researching for this, I've come across some coaching and some other things you're doing. You have to enlighten me a little bit more on what you're doing with that. But obviously giving back, wonderful. I've got all the respect in the world for that, by the way. But just in terms of like, what is lighting your fire, what's inspiring you now for the future, for the next chapter, basically? And I know, again, that's a big question, so sorry, there's been a few of those today. But in terms of in terms of what you're aiming for and what your dream is from here, given everything you've achieved already.
So I think in the back of my mind, to compete in another Olympics would be would be pretty cool, but I think I'm trying to be a bit of a realist. I'm turning 40 this year, and I'm the chair of the ICF Athletes Commission. So I guess that is giving back a little bit, and there's a few projects I'd like to work on. So I probably would be still at the competitions, which then allows my passion to sort of stay without actually being a competitor. But if I did get to compete again, it would be quite nice. But financially, it's quite a challenge at the moment to do what I did. And having a coach next to you and training partners and going to training venues, it really, I feel like I revel in that and I absolutely love it. But it also became quite a lonely journey, which I feel like I'm not really that excited about anymore. And I'm coaching at a boys' high school in Pietermaritzburg at the moment. It's my second year, and I've absolutely loved coaching them. So I feel like it's really nice to listen to them and sort of hear their goals, and then kind of see how I can support them to try and achieve a dream of maybe by the time some of them finish high school representing South Africa as well. So I think that's sort of the way that I'm trailing towards now, even though, like I said, I'd love to still compete. I'm competing a little bit locally, but I think I'm on a bit of a fence of enjoying being a coach more.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I love that. Like I said, I mean, when people have reached the top of the mountain, figuratively speaking, when you've reached that high level and you've achieved so much, to take that time to give back and to contribute to other people, I think it's one of the sort of highest aims that people can aspire to. My personal opinion, is taking that time to give back, and it's wonderful. Let's talk about one intangible topic with that then, and I say intangible, but if you had to give advice to people, who want to achieve a big goal or a big dream. This doesn't have to be sports specific. It can be, I don't mind. But just, you're working with these people, they're up and coming, they're ambitious, they've got this fire in their belly to achieve something. I mean, you still have as well by the sound of it, but you know what I mean, and you're sort of giving back to them. So again, I know it's a big question, but if someone comes to you and they say, look, Bridgitte, I want to achieve whatever it is, something that is very important to that person that's at a big level. What would be two or three key pieces of advice that you would say to people to achieve that success? I know this is a big one. That's why I've tried to narrow it down to maybe two or three things. Otherwise, we'd be here for a long time. But is there anything that comes to mind with that?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just to not give up too soon. A lot of people kind of put in 1 year's effort in and think they're going to achieve something, and it really isn't 1 year. It's a couple of years. It's a build-up process, and it's important to identify that big goal, but to have a couple small ones along the way, because you've got to have these process goals. Otherwise, you keep thinking you're not achieving the goal that you want to, which is obviously the big dream. And then there's like a cool little slogan that my dad actually shared with me a couple of years back, and he said, go with love and not fear. And I think it's pretty relevant, because a lot of us, like, we almost too scared to take on the challenge, or we have this fear of failure. But if you love something, you have to just focus on that. And it's very easy to lose like that trail of thought when you're competing, because all you're thinking about is then competing, racing, getting better at everything, and then you forget that you actually love it, and then you get thrown into this like fear factor of like, oh shucks, like I didn't get this, and then the negativity comes in. So it's important, I suppose, that to have other people around you supporting you, to help you realize that dream. When you don't always think that you can achieve something, someone else will believe that you can.
Oh, that's beautiful, actually. I knew it would be a good answer, but that's a really, really good answer. Thank you so much. Because, like I said at the beginning, I decided a long time ago, when I'm going to be doing sports interviews, they have to have that aspect of inspiration, motivation, hope, otherwise, it doesn't have that meaning. And I really think today, we've really shared some of that. So thank you so much. Pretty much the last question I have is, you've mentioned throughout this process, people who've helped you. And the way I usually close out my interviews is a little different to what some people do. Is with anyone that you would like to thank. So anyone out there who's supported you, who's helped you behind the scenes. Obviously, you know them, they know you, and you're all in working together. But from the outside world, they are effectively behind the scenes. From our point of view, if you like. So, are there people like that you'd like to give a thank you to, a shout out to, as the last question of the evening, please?
Well, I think that I would never have become the athlete that I did without my Hungarian coach, Nando Almasi. He was basically my main coach, and I left him for a few years, and it was such a bad idea. I just thought maybe I should find somebody who's a little bit more fresh and scientific. But his technique and his guidance, he was basically, I guess, like a father figure as well. He got to know my personality so well. He knew when I was moody. He knew when I was happy, or when I was actually just kind of not feeling like training. He knew how to push me as well, and he was probably the biggest support, helping me overseas and allowing me to train with the best in the world in Hungary and in Austria. So it was quite a process, obviously with ups and downs, but I think if it wasn't for him, I definitely wouldn't have achieved half of what I did. And then the paddling community in South Africa, I think I'd have to say it in general, there's a lot of them in different towns. When I was in Pretoria, the paddling club at Rietvlei, in Benoni, and now recently in Pietermaritzburg, I just feel like the clubs that I've been in have really had supportive individuals, not only financially, and a certain section, I suppose I was training with, or got support from the Olympic Committee as well as other sponsors. And I think it really is all beneficial. Like, you don't achieve that without those structures. And then the base where I started was Tux. Thanks to Tux, where I studied at the University of Pretoria, they gave me a bursary for a while and really supported me with gym training and stuff. So it's all those ground roots and the people that you meet along the way, special friends that you make, that I could definitely call some of them up now and would have some stories to talk about.
Oh, that is lovely. I mean, it's something I like to give a mention to anyway, because those people are behind the scenes and doing good work, but especially for you as well, because there's really been that theme today about, you enjoy the social aspect as well, and you have that sort of people person quality. So, to give them a mention in that way as well is brilliant. We've talked about a lot of great material today, and it's really, ticked all the boxes for me in terms of the inspiration, the hope, the fun, and that side of it, some of the lighter stuff, behind the scenes at the Olympics, what people don't see, so many different things. So the last thing for me to do is just to say thank you so much for your time. It's been great talking with you. It's been great meeting you and your cat as well. And it really, really has been lovely. So just thank you so much for your time, and thank you for taking time out of your evening to make this possible, basically.
No, it's such a pleasure. Thanks for a great interview. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.